بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. ياسين والقرآن الحكيم إنك لمن المرسلين على صراط مستقيم تنزيل العزيز الرحيم لتنذر قوما ما أنذر آباؤهم فهم غافلون لقد حق القول على أكثرهم فهم لا يؤمنون إنا جعلنا في أعناقهم أغلالا فهي إلى الأذقان فهم مقمحون وجعلنا من بين أيديهم سدا ومن خلفهم سدا فأغشيناهم فهم لا يبصرون وسواء عليهم أنذرتهم أم لم تنذرهم لا يؤمنون إنما تنذر من اتبع الذكر وخشي الرحمن بالغيب فبشره بمغفرة وأجر كريم إنا نحن نحيي الموتى ونكتب ما قدموا وآثارهم وكل شيء أحصيناه في إمام مبين واضرب لهم مثلا أصحاب القرية إذ جاءها المرسلون إذ أرسلنا إليهم 2 فكذبوهما فعززنا بثالث فقالوا إنا إليكم مرسلون قالوا ما أنتم إلا بشر مثلنا وما أنزل الرحمن من شيء إن أنتم إلا تكذبون قالوا ربنا يعلم إنا إليكم لمرسلون وما علينا إلا البلاغ المبين قالوا إنا تطيرنا بكم لئن لم تنتهوا لنرجمنكم وليمسنكم منا عذاب أليم قالوا طائركم معكم أئن ذكرتم بل أنتم قوم مسرفون وجاء من أقصى المدينة رجل يسعى قال يا قوم اتبعوا المرسلين اتبعوا من لا يسألكم أجرا وهم مهتدون وما لي لا أعبد الذي فطرني وإليه ترجعون أتخذ من دونه آلهة إن يردني الرحمن بضر لا تغن عني شفاعتهم شيئا ولا ينقذون إني إذا لفي ضلال مبين إني آمنت بربكم فاسمعون قيل ادخل الجنة قال يا ليت قومي يعلمون بما غفر لي ربي وجعلني من المكرمين وما أنزلنا على قومه من بعده من جند من السماء وما كنا منزلين إن كانت إلا صيحة واحدة فإذا هم خامدون يا حسرة على العباد ما يأتيهم من رسول إلا كانوا به يستهزئون ألم يروا كم أهلكنا قبلهم من القرون أنهم إليهم لا يرجعون وإن كل لما جميع لدينا محضرون وآية لهم الأرض الميتة أحييناها وأخرجنا منها حبا فمنه يأكلون وجعلنا فيها جنات من نخيل وأعناب وفجرنا فيها من العيون ليأكلوا من ثمره وما عملت أيديهم أفلا يشكرون سبحان الذي خلق الأزواج كلها مما تنبت الأرض ومن أنفسهم ومما لا يعلمون وآية لهم الليل نسلخ منه النهار فإذا هم مظلمون والشمس تجري لمستقر لها ذلك تقدير العزيز العليم والقمر قدرناه منازل حتى عاد كالعرجون القديم لا الشمس ينبغي لها أن تدرك القمر ولا الليل سابق النهار وكل في فلك يسبحون وآية لهم أنا حملنا ذريتهم في الفلك المشحون وخلقنا لهم من مثله ما يركبون وإن نشأ نغرقهم فلا صريخ لهم ولا هم ينقذون إلا رحمة منا ومتاعا إلى حين وإذا قيل لهم اتقوا ما بين أيديكم وما خلفكم لعلكم ترحمون وما تأتيهم من آية من آيات ربهم إلا كانوا عنها معرضين وإذا قيل لهم أنفقوا مما رزقكم الله قال الذين كفروا للذين آمنوا أنطعم من لو يشاء الله أطعمه إن أنتم إلا في ضلال مبين ويقولون متى هذا الوعد إن كنتم صادقين ما ينظرون إلا صيحة واحدة تأخذهم وهم يخصمون فلا يستطيعون توصية ولا إلى أهلهم يرجعون ونفخ في الصور فإذا هم من الأجداث إلى ربهم ينسلون قالوا يا ويلنا من بعثنا من مرقدنا هذا ما وعد الرحمن وصدق المرسلون إن كانت إلا صيحة واحدة فإذا هم جميع لدينا محضرون فاليوم لا تظلم نفس شيئا ولا تجزون إلا ما كنتم تعملون إن أصحاب الجنة اليوم في شغل فاكهون هم وأزواجهم في ظلال على الأرائك متكئون لهم فيها فاكهة ولهم ما يدعون سلام قولا من رب رحيم وامتازوا اليوم أيها المجرمون ألم أعهد إليكم يا بني آدم أن لا تعبدوا الشيطان إنه لكم عدو مبين وأن اعبدوني هذا صراط مستقيم ولقد أضل منكم جبلا كثيرا أفلم تكونوا تعقلون هذه جهنم التي كنتم توعدون اصلوها اليوم بما كنتم تكفرون اليوم نختم على أفواههم وتكلمنا أيديهم وتشهد أرجلهم بما كانوا يكسبون ولو نشاء لطمسنا على أعينهم فاستبقوا الصراط فأنى يبصرون ولو نشاء لمسخناهم على مكانتهم فما استطاعوا مضيا ولا يرجعون ومن نعمره ننكسه في الخلق أفلا يعقلون وما علمناه الشعر وما ينبغي له إن هو إلا ذكر وقرآن مبين لينذر من كان حيا ويحق القول على الكافرين أولم يروا أنا خلقنا لهم مما عملت أيدينا أنعاما فهم لها مالكون وذللناها لهم فمنها ركوبهم ومنها يأكلون ولهم فيها منافع ومشارب أفلا يشكرون واتخذوا من دون الله آلهة لعلهم ينصرون لا يستطيعون نصرهم وهم لهم جند محضرون فلا يحزنك قولهم إنا نعلم ما يسرون وما يعلنون أولم ير الإنسان أنا خلقناه من نطفة فإذا هو خصيم مبين وضرب لنا مثلا ونسي خلقه قال من يحيي العظام وهي رميم قل يحييها الذي أنشأها أول مرة وهو بكل خلق عليم الذي جعل لكم من الشجر الأخضر نارا فإذا أنتم منه توقدون أوليس الذي خلق السماوات والأرض بقادر على أن يخلق مثلهم بلى وهو الخلاق العليم إنما أمره إذا أراد شيئا أن يقول له كن فيكون فسبحان الذي بيده ملكوت كل شيء وإليه ترجعون صدق الله العلي العظيم سورة المباركة الفاتحة مع الصلوات
إن الله وملائكته يصلون على النبي يا أيها الذين آمنوا صلوا عليه وسلموا تسليما اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد الله أكبر الله أكبر الله أكبر الله أكبر أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله أشهد أن محمدا رسول الله أشهد أن محمدا رسول الله أشهد أن أمير المؤمنين وإمام المتقين عليا ولي الله أشهد أن أمير المؤمنين وإمام المتقين عليا حجة الله حي على الصلاة حي على الصلاة حي على الفلاح حي على الفلاح حي على خير العمل حي على خير العمل الله أكبر الله أكبر لا إله إلا الله لا إله إلا الله اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان اللعين الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الله أكبر الله أكبر. أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله. أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله. أشهد أن محمدا رسول الله. اللهم صل على محمد. أشهد أن محمدا رسول الله. أشهد أن عليا ولي الله. أشهد أن عليا حجة الله. حي على الصلاة حي على الصلاة حي على الفلاح حي على الفلاح حي على خير العمل حي على خير العمل. قد قامت الصلاة قد قامت الصلاة. الله أكبر الله أكبر. لا إله إلا الله. صلاة المغرب من الصلاة ونسقي ومحياي ومماتي لله رب العالمين وجهت وجهي بالفضل والسلام. الله أكبر. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين الرحمن الرحيم مالك يوم الدين إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. إنا أنزلناه في ليلة القدر وما أدراك ما ليلة القدر. ليلة القدر خير من 1000 شهر. تنزل الملائكة والروح فيها بإذن ربهم من كل أمر سلام هي حتى مطلع الفجر. الله أكبر. سبحان الله سبحان الله سبحان الله سبحان ربي العظيم وبحمده. سمع الله لمن حمده. الله أكبر. سبحان الله سبحان الله سبحان الله سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده. الله أكبر. استغفر الله ربي وأتوب إليه. الله أكبر. سبحان الله سبحان الله سبحان الله سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده. الله أكبر. بحول الله وقوته أقوم وأقعد وأرقى وأسجد. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين الرحمن الرحيم مالك يوم الدين إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. قل هو الله أحد الله الصمد لم يلد ولم يولد ولم يكن له كفوا أحد. كذلك الله ربي. الله أكبر. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. ربنا آتنا في الدنيا حسنة وفي الآخرة حسنة وقنا عذاب النار. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. الله أكبر. سبحان الله سبحان الله سبحان الله سبحان ربي العظيم وبحمده. سمع الله لمن حمده. الله أكبر. سبحان الله سبحان الله سبحان الله سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده. الله أكبر. استغفر الله ربي وأتوب إليه. الله أكبر. سبحان الله سبحان الله سبحان الله سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده. الله أكبر. الحمد لله وخير الأسماء لله. أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. بحول الله وقوته أقوم وأقعد وأرقى وأسجد. الله أكبر. سبحان الله سبحان الله سبحان الله سبحان ربي العظيم وبحمده. سمع الله لمن حمده. الله أكبر. سبحان الله سبحان الله سبحان الله سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده. الله أكبر. استغفر الله ربي وأتوب إليه. الله أكبر. سبحان الله سبحان الله سبحان الله سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمد. ربي صل على محمد وآل محمد يا لطيف ارحم عبدك الضعيف. الله أكبر. الحمد لله وخير الأسماء لله. أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. السلام عليك أيها النبي ورحمة الله وبركاته. السلام علينا وعلى عباد الله الصالحين. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. الله أكبر الله أكبر الله أكبر. لا إله إلا الله. إن الله وملائكته يصلون على النبي يا أيها الذين آمنوا صلوا عليه وسلموا تسليما.
اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. اللهم إني أسألك موجبات رحمتك وعزائم مغفرتك والنجاة من النار ومن كل بلية والفوز بالجنة ورضوان في دار السلام وجوار نبيك محمد عليه وآله السلام. اللهم ما بنا من نعمة فمنك لا إله إلا أنت أستغفرك وأتوب إليك.
اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد.
Inshallah, we'll be reciting the salat for the first nights of al-Hijjah. Of course, for all the niyat, but inshallah, we'll be reciting it out loud. I will be, inshallah. As-salat, as-salat, as-salat. Allahu Akbar. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Ar-Rahmanir Rahim. Maliki Yawmiddin. إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. قل هو الله أحد الله الصمد لم يلد ولم يولد ولم يكن له كفوا أحد. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. ووعدنا موسى 30 ليلة وأتممناها ب10 فتم ميقات ربه 40 ليلة. وقال موسى لأخيه هارون اخلفني في قومي وأصلح ولا تتبع سبيل المفسدين. الله أكبر. سبحان الله سبحان الله سبحان الله سبحان ربي العظيم وبحمده. سمع الله لمن حمده. الله أكبر. سبحان الله سبحان الله سبحان الله سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده. الله أكبر. استغفر الله ربي وأتوب إليه. الله أكبر. سبحان الله سبحان الله سبحان الله سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده. الله أكبر. بحول الله وقوته أقوم وأقعد وأرقى وأسجد. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين الرحمن الرحيم مالك يوم الدين إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. قل هو الله أحد الله الصمد لم يلد ولم يولد ولم يكن له كفوا أحد. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. ووعدنا موسى 30 ليلة وأتممناها ب10 فتم ميقات ربه 40 ليلة. وقال موسى لأخيه هارون اخلفني في قومي وأصلح ولا تتبع سبيل المفسدين. الله أكبر. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. ربنا آتنا في الدنيا حسنة وفي الآخرة حسنة وقنا عذاب النار. الله أكبر. سبحان الله سبحان الله سبحان الله سبحان ربي العظيم وبحمده. سمع الله لمن حمده. الله أكبر. سبحان الله سبحان الله سبحان الله سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده. الله أكبر. استغفر الله ربي وأتوب إليه. الله أكبر. سبحان الله سبحان الله سبحان الله سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمد. ربي صل على محمد وآل محمد يا لطيف ارحم عبدك الضعيف. الله أكبر. الحمد لله وخير الأسماء لله. أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له، وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. السلام عليك أيها النبي ورحمة الله وبركاته. السلام علينا وعلى عباد الله الصالحين. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. الله أكبر، الله أكبر، الله أكبر، لا إله إلا الله. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان اللعين الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الله أكبر، الله أكبر. أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله، أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله، أشهد أن محمدا رسول الله، أشهد أن محمدا رسول الله، أشهد أن عليا ولي الله، أشهد أن عليا حجة الله. حي على الصلاة، حي على الصلاة، حي على الفلاح، حي على الفلاح، حي على خير العمل، حي على خير العمل. قد قامت الصلاة، قد قامت الصلاة. الله أكبر، الله أكبر، لا إله إلا الله. صلاة الشهادة، الصلاة. الله أكبر. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين، الرحمن الرحيم، مالك يوم الدين. إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين. اهدنا الصراط المستقيم، صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. إنا أنزلناه في ليلة القدر، وما أدراك ما ليلة القدر. ليلة القدر خير من 1000 شهر. تنزل الملائكة والروح فيها بإذن ربهم من كل أمر. سلام هي حتى مطلع الفجر. الله أكبر. سبحان الله سبحان الله سبحان الله سبحان ربي العظيم وبحمده. سمع الله لمن حمده. الله أكبر. سبحان الله سبحان الله سبحان الله سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده. الله أكبر. استغفر الله ربي وأتوب إليه. الله أكبر. سبحان الله سبحان الله سبحان الله سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده. الله أكبر. بحول الله وقوته أقوم وأقعد وأرقى وأسجد. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين الرحمن الرحيم مالك يوم الدين. إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين. اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. قل هو الله أحد الله الصمد لم يلد ولم يولد ولم يكن له كفوا أحد. كذلك الله ربي. الله أكبر. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. ربنا آتنا في الدنيا حسنة وفي الآخرة حسنة وقنا عذاب النار. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. الله أكبر. سبحان الله سبحان الله سبحان الله سبحان ربي العظيم وبحمده. سمع الله لمن حمده. الله أكبر. سبحان الله سبحان الله سبحان الله سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده. الله أكبر. استغفر الله ربي وأتوب إليه. الله أكبر. سبحان الله سبحان الله سبحان الله سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده. الله أكبر. الحمد لله وخير الأسماء لله. أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. بحول الله وقوته أقوم وأقعد وأرقى وأسجد. الله أكبر. سبحان الله سبحان الله سبحان الله سبحان ربي العظيم وبحمده. سمع الله لمن حمده. الله أكبر. سبحان الله سبحان الله سبحان الله سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده. الله أكبر. استغفر الله ربي وأتوب إليه. الله أكبر. سبحان الله سبحان الله سبحان الله سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده. الله أكبر. بحول الله وقوته أقوم وأقعد وأرقى وأسجد. الله أكبر. سبحان الله سبحان الله سبحان الله سبحان ربي العظيم وبحمده. سمع الله لمن حمده. الله أكبر. سبحان الله سبحان الله سبحان الله سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده. الله أكبر. استغفر الله ربي وأتوب إليه. الله أكبر. سبحان الله سبحان الله سبحان الله سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمد. رب صل على محمد وآل محمد. الله أكبر. الحمد لله وخير الأسماء لله. أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. السلام عليك أيها النبي ورحمة الله وبركاته. السلام علينا وعلى عباد الله الصالحين. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. الله أكبر الله أكبر الله أكبر. لا إله إلا الله. إن الله وملائكته يصلون على النبي يا أيها الذين آمنوا صلوا عليه وسلموا تسليما.
اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. اللهم صل على محمد.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. اللهم صل على محمد وعلى محمد. اللهم إنه ليس العلم بموضع رزقي، وإنما أطلبه بخطرات تحت على قلبي، فأجول في طلبه البلدان، فأنا فيما أنا طالب كالحيران، لا أدري في سحل هو أم في جبل، أم في أرض أم في سماء، أم في بر أم في بحر، وعلى يدي من ومن قبل من، وقد علمت أن علمه عندك وأسبابه بيدك، وأنت التي تقسمه بلطفك وتسببه برحمتك. اللهم فصل على محمد وآله، واجعل يا رب رزقك لي واسعا، ومطلبه سهلا، وماخذه قريبا، ولا تعنني بطلب ما لم تقدر لي فيه رزقا، فإنه غني عن عذابي وأنا فقير إلى رحمتك. فصل على محمد وآله، واجد ربك بفضلك، إنك ذو فضل عظيم.
محمد وآل محمد صلوات. آباد ہوئی کرب و بلا حجرہ مدینہ برباد ہوئی میں. یوں حضرت زینب نے کہا پیٹ کے سینہ برباد ہوئی میں. ایک دن تھا کہ چادر میرے سر سے گری تھی سورج بھی نہ نکلا سر ننگے پھراتا ہے مجھے آج کمینہ برباد ہوئی میں. ایک دن تھا کہ اس شعر کی کرتی تھی میں شاہی اور آج تباہی بے غسل پڑا مور نبوت کا نگینہ برباد ہوئی میں. آباد ہوئی کرب و بلا حجرہ مدینہ برباد ہوئی میں. بھائی موئے بیٹے موئے زندہ میں پھنسے ہیں وارث نہیں کوئی عباس نہیں جیتے نہیں شاہ مدینہ برباد ہوئی میں. یہ نیل تماچوں میں منہ پہ پڑے ہیں میں کس کو دکھاؤں نیزے کے تلے بیٹھ کے روتی ہے سکینہ برباد ہوئی میں. آباد ہوئی کرب و بلا حجرہ مدینہ برباد हजरत ज़ैनब ने कहा पीत के सीना बर्बाद हुई मैं। मोहम्मद सल्लल्लाहु अलैहि।
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. Dr. Sayyid Shabbir Kirmani, respected elders, brothers and sisters, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Surah Al-Fatiha is requested for the Isa'al Sawab of Marhumeen listed on the screen and for all Marhumeen. Al-Fatiha. Ayama Yujib requested for the names listed on the screen and for all those in need here and elsewhere. Let us recite together. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Amma yujibul muttarra idha da'ahu wa yakshifu as-su'. Amma yujibul muttarra idha da'ahu wa yakshifu as-su'. أَمَّنْ يُجِيبُ الْمُضْطَرَّ إِذَا دَعَاهُ وَيَكْشِفُ السُّوءَ أَمَّنْ يُجِيبُ الْمُضْطَرَّ إِذَا دَعَاهُ وَيَكْشِفُ السُّوءَ أَمَّنْ يُجِيبُ الْمُضْطَرَّ إِذَا دَعَاهُ وَيَكْشِفُ السُّوءَ اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. Ladies program. The Ladies Committee has organized a special program to celebrate the 3 Eids of Zil-Hajj and Shadi Milad on Friday, July 7th at 4:30 p.m. here at the Masjid. Please RSVP to Sister Batul Mukhi at 785-220-0015. This program is open to ladies only and dinner will be served. At this time, I would like to invite Dr. Kirmani to give tonight's lecture with a loud salawat ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان اللعين الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم فوض أمري إلى الله إن الله بصير بالعباد ولا حول ولا قوة إلا بالله العلي العظيم حسبنا الله ونعم الوكيل ونعم المولى ونعم النصير والصلاة والسلام والتحية والإكرام على الرسول المسدد المصطفى الأمجد المحمود الأحمد الذي سمي في السماء بأحمد وفي الأرض بأبي القاسم محمد اللهم صل على محمد وعلى أهل بيت الطيبين الطاهرين المعصومين المظلومين المنتجبين الذين أذهب الله عنهم الرجس وطهرهم تطهيرا اللهم صل على وقل رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقه قولي أما بعد قال الله تبارك وتعالى في كتاب الكريم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم إنما يخشى الله من عباده العلماء صدق الله العلي العظيم زينوا مجالسكم بالصلوات على محمد وآل محمد اللهم صل على My respected elders, brothers and sisters in Islam and Iman here in Florida, across the globe, wherever you're hearing my voice, Salamun alaikum jami'an wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Question, what is the power of knowledge? We're told there's a moment in time where a man has become elderly and he has lost his vision, he's lost his sight, and he is in the vicinity of the mosque. And when he's in the vicinity of the mosque, he is hearing the steps of people passing by. And at one moment, he begins to hear particular footsteps, and he begins to ask this person who's passing by to come closer. And this young person moves closer to the man, the elderly man, and he says that you sound like him, that your presence sounds like his. And then he begins to say, Salamu alaikum wa alaikum assalam. He says, you sound like him. He says, can you please tell me what your name is? He says, my name is Muhammad. And then he continues. He says that you sound like him, you have his name, you walk like him. I can tell that your presence is like him, although I am not able to see you. He says, your name is Muhammad. He says, son of whom? He says, son of Ali. He says, son of who? Son of Hussein. Son of who? Son of Ali. At that point in time, he says that this is the moment I've been waiting for. This is the moment that I've been yearning for. This is the moment that I've been waiting for. He says, I am Jabir ibn Abdullah al-Ansari, and I convey unto you the salams of the Holy Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa alihi wa sallam. Allahumma salam. This is a moment where Jabir recognized the Imam that we are here to commemorate, the fifth holy Imam, Imam Muhammad al-Baqir, who was given and conveyed salams by Rasulullah himself and told by Jabir to make sure that you convey my salams and my salutation to this descendant of mine. Why is it that Rasulullah would send a salam to someone? That is there some particularity about family, or is there some other reason as to why the Imam, the Rasulullah was indicating this? These are some of the things that we want to look at tonight and try to understand, what does this Imam teach us about what our priorities should be in our environments and our times as followers of Ahlul Bayt, and how can we learn from what he emphasized in terms of his time for us to focus on in our time. Therefore, to this end, I want to look at what is it that the Imam alayhi salam focused on when he had some relative freedom compared to the other Imams. As you see, his father and his grandfather did not have the openness to be able to propagate and teach the way that Imam Baqir did. And so when Imam Baqir finally got this opportunity, what did he choose to emphasize when there was relative freedom? First point. Number two, what is it that we can learn from what the Maraji and the Mujtahideen and the ulama of the Hawza al-Ilmiya have indicated with respect to what Shi'as should be known for throughout the world? What is it that they emphasize based on the teachings of the Ahlul Bayt that should be our point of emphasis to understand in our lives? And what should we as Shi'as of Ahlul Bayt excel at based on what they have understood from the teachings of the Ahlul Bayt? Number three, how is it that the Imam shows us how to pursue excellence, not only in what we deem to be those sciences and arts which are Islamic, but even broader than that? How did the Imam, this fifth Imam, show us excellence in terms of multiple dimensions of life, and how does it relate to our world today? And finally, based on this, how can we understand this Imam as being a connection between the heart and mind of Tashayyu and Shi'ism, especially as he was an eyewitness to Karbala and the tragedies therein of Karbala? And how does he remind us to have heart as well as compassion in our lives? This is our agenda for tonight. Wherever you are, here in Florida, across the globe, from the bottom of your heart, send a salawat ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Allahumma salli. At the first level, our blessed Imam al-Baqir, the fifth Imam, is someone who is well-renowned and well-respected, not only by the Shia community, by the way. He's also respected by the Ahl Sunnah community, particularly the Sufi community within the Sunni community. And they say that he is a scholar par excellence, number one. Number two, he's the father of Ja'far as-Sadiq, who is respected by the Sunni community, in particular the Sufi tariqas and communities. And they say that he's a huge scholar in and of himself. Number one. Number two, when it comes to this Imam, some baseline facts that we should know about him. For example, he was born in the 57th year of Hijrah, 57 AH, which of course with Karbala happening in the beginning of the 61st year of Hijrah, this means that the Imam was roughly 3 to 4 years of age at the time of Karbala. So he was a present eyewitness to the events of Karbala and thereafter, number one. Number two, he also lived for 57 years. That means he was born in 57 after Hijrah, he also lived for 57 years. So if you do the math on that, you will find that he lived up until 114 AH. Having said this, this is a time and period that is after Rasulullah, but it's a very important time in the history of Islam and the world at large. In this environment, this Imam who saw Karbala and the tragedies and the atrocities of Karbala, he then was able to move Shiaism into a different environment where he actually had the ability to teach the next generation. You see, in Karbala, Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam, due to the persecution, was not able to teach the way that he would have liked to perhaps. He had to go to the battlefield because he had to establish justice. His son, Imam Sajjad, if you recall, again, same goal of the A'immah, of the Ahlul Bayt, but different approaches based on the Zaman and Makan, the time and space. Imam Sajjad didn't go to battle. In fact, Zayd fought during that time, but Imam said Zayd is on the right path, he's right, but this stand is not the one that we will join or support. Zayd is Shaheed. So where the Zaydi movement comes from. So the Imam didn't fight. So what did the Imam do? He did a few things. The three things that the fourth Imam, Imam Sajjad, the father of Imam Baqir, did was, he first established his imamat without dividing the Shia community further, and that was because Muhammad Hanafiya had said that he's the Imam afterwards, because there was confusion, who will be the Imam after Hussein, because it was father, son, then brother. Will it be brother again or will it be son again? But there were clear riwayat from the Ahlul Bayt for those who knew that after Hassan and Hussein there will be no more sibling Imams. But some forgot, some may not have remembered, and so Muhammad Hanafiya declared this. So the fourth Imam, he had to not cause further divisions, so he had Hajrul Aswad. He had his uncle say, my uncle, do you accept if Hajrul Aswad will give the evidence and make the decision? And he said, yes, very well. And there's a very famous incident where Hajrul Aswad gave the evidence and proof, and that this is the Imam of the time. And so he had to do that. Number one, establish his imamat without causing further division. Number two, he had to unite the Shia community, because now there were fractions of the Shias after Karbala. Some were following this view, and some said we need to fight, and some people said this and that. And so there were different fractions. And subhanAllah, the way that the Imam used to unite the Shia community was in fact what is unfortunately sometimes, when I look across America and across our Shia community globally, is sometimes what is being used to divide the Shia community today. And that is the Majlis Aza of Sayyid al-Shuhada. Imam Sajjad used it to bring people under one roof and say, this is the Azab of Sayyid al-Shuhada. If nothing else, you unite on this sorrow and mourning. Today, unfortunately, in some places you'll find that people will say that it's my way or the highway. I've done Aza in my family for this way and this method and this technique, and this is how we've always done it, and we will continue to do it. And you know, there's many cities where there's 10 Imam Bargas within a 10-mile radius, and you know examples of this better than I am. Imam Bargas are not bad. There's no problem with that. In fact, we should have Imam Bargas. But the concept is sometimes when they're across the street that you wonder if there's some better way of approaching things. And this is a global phenomenon that you'll find. So Imam Sajjad is trying to bring people together under one roof with the Azab Sayyid al-Shuhada. And the final thing that he did was, he could not propagate openly what true Islam was because of the Umayyad Empire. So he used implicit du'as through the teachings of Sahifa Sajjadiyya and Risalat al-Huquq or Risalat al-Kamila, through the du'as of Sahifa Sajjadiyya and the rights in the Treaty of Rights. The Imam indicated what is true Islam and how Banu Umayyah was not allowing for true Islam to flourish. And also at the same time, he was indicating that the rights are being violated. He was indirectly also saying that these people are not following the rights of what Islam is endowed on humanity. So he was indirectly propagating as much as he could. But finally came the era and time of Imam al-Baqir. And during that time, when the Imam had some relative freedom, he used this opportunity in order to educate the masses. He educated them in the Quran, he educated them in the ahadith, he educated them on the issue of the usul al-fiqh, that is the principles of jurisprudence, and how to actually derive law. And also many times people say this marja'iyya system, maybe it's something new, but you'll find that the Imam, the fifth Imam himself, had deputies in Kufa. And his son, Imam Sadiq, also had deputies. While he's alive, he had representatives who were in Kufa or in other cities. While they were in Medina, he said, this is my representative in this city or that city, Basra or Kufa or wherever there were satellite campuses, if you will. And so this is something that had already been established. But the Imam used that environment to educate people. Why is it so important for us to be aware of this? And I say this at a time where there's grave cause for concern, somewhat at least, I don't want to be alarmist, but about the education system in the United States. Now, if you look at the focus of an education system, there needs to be a philosophy behind what is the goal that you are trying to produce on the other side. And one of the things is, in liberal arts education, as I've mentioned to you, the idea that many wealthy people and people who send their kids to private institutions, they want their children to have liberated minds or liberal arts education, to be able to think freely. But if you look at more public programs, I'm a product of public education myself, but I went on a journey to try to get a different form of education through my own private studies and readings and understandings. And you find that the goal of public education at the federal level and state is often to be able to get into a good college or a good institution, which is fair and noble in itself, perhaps. And then the next goal is to be able to function well as an employee. Now, there's some challenges here. Sometimes you'll notice that in public institutions, even in the colleges of business or others, the focus is often on employment. And that has its own merit, but they may not emphasize, unless you have some special interest yourself, on something like entrepreneurship, which is also very good. So you need to be very careful about what is the end goal that is being implicitly or indirectly you're being nudged towards, or you're being invited towards, whether you realize it or not, number one. Number two, many, and if not all, of the progress that we have in society is a result of education and a reflection on what is in front of us. For example, when it comes to many of the medications that we have in the modern world that have helped to save many, many lives, penicillin or the likes of the TB vaccine or other vaccines that have happened, that have helped society, those would not have come out had it not been for education. You look at a lot of the technology that we have today, those are a result of education. Many of us may be alive today because of there are certain medical procedures that we're aware of that perhaps we weren't aware of hundreds of years ago. So this progress has helped to also extend human lives. There was a time in the history of America, not the rest of the world, even in America, in the 1800s, where women didn't live beyond 38, 39, or 40 years of age. They live a lot longer comparatively today. There was an era and time where many mothers died during childbirth. Still, unfortunately, some mothers do. But one of the reasons that they passed away was that they found that sometimes just washing hands between delivering a child could save lives. These are things that through education and analysis we've been able to understand and recognize. Another example of this is artificial intelligence and quantum computing. And these things are really important. Now, you may say, why do I need education? And did the Ahlul Bayt actually emphasize anything beyond just Islamic education? And I want to give you the example of the Imam, of course, teaching about Quran and other things. But I want us to reflect on what the scholars of Ahlul Bayt have said, and then come right back to what Imam al-Baqir teaches us. In 2015, I had the opportunity to go to visit some of the scholarship in the Hawza of Najaf. And you'll be surprised, some of our scholars are so open-minded and they are so willing to speak that we sometimes, it's shocking that we don't engage with them. I was speaking to someone at a very high level from the Shia community, who was a leader of the Shia community for many years, and he had met with Sayyid Sistani, Hafidhahumullah, may Allah protect him, many times. in a private meeting about the future trajectory of the community. He said that he was more than open with meeting with young people or people of intellect or intellectuals to discuss what's going on in the world and developing. So you may find that they're a lot more open-minded than we may perceive. And why not? Education should do that to one. But the question is, are we doing our job? Why do I say that? In the history of Tashayyu, there have been scholars, I remind you, that the Ahl Sunnah Muslim, broader Muslim world said, we wish these people were Sunnis, or not Shias. They were, at least from our school of thought. For example, Khwaja Nasiruddin al-Tusi, a scholar par excellence who was from the Shia community and was one of the greatest scientists of his time. The Tusi couple, Copernicus's model of the universe is not complete without the Tusi couple. And he was an Islamic scholar. And he had a catch and pitch relationship between him and Allama Hilli. Allama Hilli was his teacher, Khwaja Nasiruddin Tusi's teacher, in terms of fiqh and usul and Quran and Islamic sciences. But look at the humility of Allama Hilli, where Allama Hilli would learn from his own student in the area of science, astronomy, physics, mathematics. You know, sometimes you think that, oh, I know too much. But if Musa and Khidr teaches us anything, it says that you're not always the alim-e-kul in every domain. This is what happens in our world when you get what's called the God complex. You know the God complex? The God complex is when you understand one complicated system, you think you can understand every complicated system. So for example, if somebody is very good at business and entrepreneurship and they become a billionaire or trillionaire, for example, or a half a billionaire or whatever, they think, I understand business, so therefore maybe I understand medicine, and I also understand physics, and I also understand, you fill in the blanks. Not necessarily so. And vice versa. Somebody can be very scientifically aware. That doesn't necessarily mean that they are well versed in business and economics. I'll give you the example of Isaac Newton that I've mentioned to you before. Isaac Newton was one of the greatest minds, mathematicians and physicists, and he came up with Newtonian mechanics. But the Bank of England 400 years ago said, you're so brilliant, we want you to manage our money. And even in that, he did a very good job, but then at the end, he made a blunder as well with the South Sea bubble. He made a mistake financially. So some of the greatest minds make blunders in different areas. You have to know what are your limitations. So now coming back to this, Nasiruddin Tusi, great alim. Ibn Sina, Avicenna, was an Ismaili Shia scholar who some say he became Isna Ashari, or there's a debate, but whatever it was, he was one of these. Now, if the Western world today says the Muslim world has produced a great philosopher, they say the greatest philosopher of the Middle Ages, regardless of Muslim, Christian, doesn't matter, period, they say Ibn Sina or Avicenna. Avicenna's Al-Qanun fi Tib, the canon of medicine as it's translated in English, was used as the med school textbook for centuries, up until about 400 years ago in some parts of the world. Now, this was someone who also wrote a tafsir on the Quran, and in the Quran, he commented on the Quran. So there was not a differentiation between Islamic sciences and secular sciences. That is, if you understood that Allah has created all of this, then why would you not reflect on this? You know, today, we're finding that some of the cures possibly, of male baldness, pattern baldness, we're finding from moles in the animal world that we've just found out recently. That is, how do they regenerate their hair, and how is it that humans can benefit from that? This is one example. For example, we've just discovered that scientists have been able to unfreeze rat organs and actually transplant them. So, is this 100%? Maybe not, but we're edging towards that direction where human beings are making tremendous progress. But you may find that the ones that are making progress are the few who may be educated and actually delving in the sciences and technologies and understanding. But what does that mean for the rest who don't necessarily get educated? And remember, education, much like if someone goes to the doctor and says that the doctor checks their blood pressure, their vitals, their blood work, and says that, my friend, you need to work on your diet, you need to work on your exercise, you're 50, 60, 70, you can't continue the way that you were continuing when you were 20 or 18 or 19. And then the patient begins to say, Doc, no, I'm good, I'm fine. Doc, I used to work out and I used to play volleyball and soccer and badminton and everything when I was 18, 19, 20 years old. And the doctor will say, hold on, buddy, that's not how it works. Yeah, you worked out at that time. Yeah, you died in exercise and you were very athletic at that time. But your body was also different at that time. Your metabolism was different at that time. And you need to keep working out and exercising throughout your lifetime. You can't just say, I lifted and I worked out when I was 19, 20, 21 and expect it to benefit you for the rest of your life. without you adapting. You still can't eat junk food if you ate junk food at that time. Maybe your body was more forgiving. The same analogy is for knowledge. Someone may say, yeah, I studied in college when I was 19, 20, 21. Yeah, I read a book when I was in high school. You know, there's stats that say the average American high school student doesn't finish a single book cover to cover after they graduate. It's a tremendous travesty. That is, we just close the books sometimes when we need it the most. And this is something that we need to be very mindful of. Imam al-Baqir, he gives us this example of how to be comprehensively educated. By the way, I should mention to you that this was not only in the past where there are great scholars like Nasiruddin al-Tusi and Avicenna. If you look at the life of great scholars in our lifetime who've been there, for example, or just a generation past, you'll find the likes of Allama Tabatabai, who was he was quite exceptional in mathematics. I wouldn't say he was a mathematician, but he had studied it formally, he had studied physics, he had studied astronomy. Shaheed al-Sadr, Muhammad Baqir al-Sadr, who was killed by the Ba'athist regime, as you know, he was someone who had well studied politics, economics, philosophy, Western and Eastern quite thoroughly, and when you read his writings, you're quite blown away, to say the least. As a story to this line, they asked him, Shaheed al-Sadr, how is it that you are able to excel so much? Now, Shaheed al-Sadr is someone who's unique, and he's a really amazing personality. You know, a student came, he was a very busy scholar, and he's a scholar who many Maraja today say that if he was alive, they would not declare his Marja'iyah, because out of respect of his knowledge. Anyways, there was a young boy who asked Shaheed al-Sadr a mathematics problem while he was leaving the haram. And people said that, you know, why don't you ask your math teacher, why are you bugging him and why are you bothering him? But despite his busy schedule, he stopped there, sat with the young man and helped explain mathematics to him for quite some time. Meaning, it was not just about this child, although that's very important. He's emphasizing to the people the importance of knowledge and what happens if you're not aware and you're not educating yourself throughout. You can become a tool. And this is what I was alluding to in the Jummah khutbah. If you're not aware of the philosophy and the spirit of something, you may lose it. Hajj was about uniting the Muslim Ummah under one umbrella and saying that you should not differentiate yourself and say, just because I have nicer quality products and material, I'm better than anyone. But you can see the trajectory as clear as day with the hotels that are coming, with the packages that are coming, with the X, Y, and Z that are coming, right under your nose, Hajj will become materialized. And Hajj has become, in some sense, already glamorous in some sense. And so if you're going to Hajj, and saying that I'm going to Hajj and I'm staying at this hotel and I'm eating at this restaurant and I'm doing this, you may be missing the essence of what Hajj was all about in the first place. The Hajj was not about, going on vacation and holiday for the sake of going on vacation and holiday. It was supposed to be a spiritual journey and return to Allah. But if you and I are not cognizant of that, what ends up happening is in front of our own nose, in front of our own eyes, the spirituality leaves the equation. I'm surprised that this Kaaba has not been sold yet by some of these people. That's the only thing that's left and remaining. But you never know. History tells that these things have happened before. Anyways, coming back to Imam al-Baqir. And there's, of course, the likes of many scholars such as Ayatollah Hassan Zadeh Amali, may Allah bless his soul, who passed away recently. He was a mathematician par excellence, as well as a great scholar and an arif. So it's important to keep in mind that our scholarship is not multi-dimensional. It's it's not unidimensional, actually. They're quite multi-dimensional. In fact, many scholars, like said Khomeini, even was very well versed in social sciences, political science, and many other things. And we should give credit where credit is due. In fact, Islamic economics without Shaheed al-Sadr falls on its face in the Muslim world at large. He's the biggest contributor in the last 50 years to that space. So now come to the time of Imam al-Baqir. There was a big issue in the empire during the time of Imam al-Baqir. The coinage was being minted in Byzantium, in Rome at that time. And the Muslim world was getting their coinage from this area. Now, they did not know how to mint their own coins. And the monopoly was held by the Byzantine Empire. By the Romans had the monopoly on this. Now, when the Muslims tried to break this monopoly, they realized that they had a problem. They did not know how to mint currency. They did not know how to make this currency. And because they did not know how to make this currency, they were at the footsteps and they were at the disposal of the Byzantine Empire. They said, who can teach us how to do this? It wasn't until they reached out to Imam al-Baqir. Imam al-Baqir is the one who taught them how to mint currency. Now you may think that's an old problem. This is still true today. What's happening on our global front? Now you see when 2007, 2008, 2009's recession happened and what's going on in our world today, there was something called currency swap lines that were created. So the world has caught on to this. Countries like China and Saudi Arabia and many other countries have said, hold on a second, what are these currency swap lines? So the United States Federal Reserve said that, you know what, we're going to make these agreements with certain countries. The first currency swap lines actually emerged in the 1960s. They emerged between Canada, the United Kingdom, and the United States. And it was a way to give liquidity to these different banks. So for example, if there's a huge crisis going on, the banks in Europe, for example, would have to sell their assets in order to give people dollars. But they said that, hold on a second, that's going to cause the banks to go bankrupt. So they said that they can have an agreement with two central banks, like US and the Eurozone, and say that the US will provide liquidity. But here's the problem. Places like China and other countries said, hold on a second, why is it that you, when you're in a tight bind, you can do quantitative easing, which is printing money, but my people can't do it? And you and your buddies are able to benefit from it. The countries that have access to a currency swap, such as Japan, such as Switzerland, such as the Eurozone, such as the United Kingdom, such as Canada, Australia, but nobody else has access to do that. And that's why the Kenyan president, with due credit to him, he said the IMF and the International Monetary Fund and the World Bank, they're hostage to rich countries. And the other countries are coming up and saying, hold on a second, why should you have the right to print money and you and your buddies do it, but we don't have the right to do so? And so they created their own forms of currency swap lines between China and Saudi Arabia, and many other countries have also established these. And Qatar and, for example, the Gulf nations and Turkey. These are swap lines that they've made. And so this is still a really big issue. The Imam helped solve this problem. Now, how does this relate to our communities and our societies? Well, when it comes to issues, we should have these fireside chats in our communities. About what? About decentralized finance, about how do we utilize funding in our community to the betterment of the society and the community at large. Not to question and say that things are going bad or corruptly, but to say, how do we optimize something? How do we make something better? And that's where the Imam came in. First example, his solutions to the financial dilemmas of the time, number one. Number two, this same Imam was being, as you know, harassed by the rulers of the time, Imam al-Baqir. So they tried to make fun of him and say, this guy's a nerd, in our language, excuse my language. But he's just a bookworm. He's always studying, he's always reading. Baqir is an alim, no doubt. But what does he know about what we know? We're, polished, we're refined. So they were having a gathering, and in this gathering, they said, we're going to make fun of Baqir today. How? They said, we're going to have an archery competition. As you know, Rasulullah has said that teach your children swimming and horse riding and archery. And so at that point in time, they perhaps did not remember this or know this, but they said, Baqir, Imam Muhammad al-Baqir, what does he know about archery? And so they were experts in it, and they had been practicing it day in and day out. And so at that point in time, they called him and said, Yabna Rasulullah, we're spontaneously having an archery competition. Why don't you indulge us and join in? And so the Imam said, I think I'm okay, I'll watch, you guys can continue on. Now they had a goal, they had an intent, which was try to make fun of the Imam. And they said, no, we insist, please participate, please take care, please participate with us. And at that point in time, he said, very well. So the Imam takes an arrow, he takes a bow, and he takes aim. And when he takes aim, he releases the arrow, and it pierces the bullseye. It pierces the bullseye, they're all astonished, and they're shocked, and they're like, beginner's luck, this is unbelievable, what happened? They said, try another one, let's give you another chance. So they gave him another one. He said, are you sure? I think I'm fine, I don't need to. He said, no, let's do another one. So the Imam takes the other one, he takes aim for the same bullseye, let's go. It pierces the first one. So it goes to the bullseye once again. And now they're saying, what on earth is going on? We thought that he's just a bookworm. We thought he's just Allah. We thought he's just sitting in the mosque. He's just reading Quran. What does he know about the world? And they said, no, one more time. Third time's the charm. Let's try it one more time. It's no way. They said, there's no way he can get 3 in a row. Like imagine for a moment, someone's doing archery in our world today and they're doing 3 bullseye in a row, or someone is playing golf and they get a hole in one consistently 3 times in a row or something like that, right? How does that happen? It's the third time. The Imam, third time, takes the aim, let's go, it pierces the third one. Some narrations say this happened up to 9 times. The Imam kept doing the same thing again and again. And they said, we've had enough. Okay, that's fine. We got the picture. We got the point. The point being that the Imam was comprehensively whole-rounded and not someone who was just knowing about what we call Islamic sciences in the Quran. This is what true ilm was, to be able to be comprehensively understood and educated, to be understood, and to also be able to lay the foundation of the future of the Shia community. That's why his son, Imam al-Sadiq, moved the pendulum forward by building on what his father had built. And that's why the whole Muslim world is indebted to his son, Imam al-Sadiq. But it was the father who laid the foundation. I say this why? Because even Orientalists, when they've studied Islam, they ask the likes of Karen Armstrong and others, who say Islam had its golden age, where there was science and math and things that were flourishing out of the Islamic world. What happened and why isn't it happening now? And at that time there was Islamic knowledge and science, but also what we call scientific secular knowledge as well, what we in our term parlance call. When will we get back to that era? Karen Armstrong says, not my words, her words, she said that era will not come back to the Muslim world until and unless you send your best minds to mullah school. Her words, not my word. The idea was that the intellectual capital that you have is supposed to be that group that is supposed to chart your path of where you're going as a community, as a society, in your vision. But if you put people in that position who are not worthy, or who are not the brightest of the bright, who are not the cream of the crop, then the rest of the crop doesn't go that far. It's called the law of the lid. The leadership, if it's limited, the rest of the crowd will only go up to the level of the leader. And if the leader is limited, they won't go beyond. The leader has to be having a vision that's much beyond what other people can see. This is exactly what Rasulullah did in a 23-year period. Every historian, when they've looked at the life of Rasulullah, they said, how did someone take people who were slaves just a few years ago and made some of them generals into armies, the likes of Bilal and others, into army generals and leaders? So he was not just a leader, he was a leader of leaders. He was a creator of leaders. How does that happen? It's not a small feat. It's not a small thing. And so this is what the Ahlul Bayt were inculcating, that if you want to have a sense of leadership, the first principle is to obtain knowledge, to become educated, and then lead others across the way. And if you're not, if education is not normalized, what happens is, you can fool me, I can fool you, and you don't even realize it. What's the old quote that Mark Twain said? It's easier to fool someone than to convince them that they have been fooled. You go around America and crowds across the world, you find that sometimes people, good people, sincere people, who are church-going, religious people, don't know how the political system has been used against them. Sometimes because they don't have the time to think about these things. I was speaking at Jummah and one of my dear brothers came to me and afterwards, and I still need to verify this, but it sounds very plausible. I've come across similar studies, that one of the leading causes of death in America is actually poverty. People working multiple jobs, people not having the time to have the best health for them and things of this nature. It affects people in the long run. If you look at sometimes economically disadvantaged locations, even the restaurants that they have there sometimes are not the best for people's health. And so the person who's living in that environment sometimes doesn't have the time to think, what is good for me, what's bad for me, I just have to survive. And when you're surviving, you're not thriving. And this is sometimes a system. But as followers of the Ahlul Bayt, we should be very mindful that we try to make the world better for everyone. Because remember, if the French Revolution teaches you anything, and the history of the world teaches you anything, there is a rubber band effect. And last thing before I go to Masaib, a rubber band effect. Meaning, people will tolerate the haves and have-nots up until a point until the rubber band snaps. And when the rubber band snaps, those who are have-nots, they come to the throats of those who are haves. And there is bloodshed. And this is what the history of the world says. And so sometimes it's better to have a little bit more equity in some sense, rather than extreme polarization. And this is what the Imams invited us to. Nonetheless, there's much to say about Imam al-Baqir, but through his vision and mission, we should perhaps try to make the world a better place intellectually and ethically and socially and morally through education and understanding. we turn our hearts to Imam al-Baqir. The narrations say that when the enemy and the Umayyad empire realized that this intellect of this Imam was second to none, and he was someone who was waking up the masses, they found him to be a threat. And at one point in time, according to some narrations, they actually took the saddle that the Imam had for his ride, for his horse, and they poisoned the saddle itself, so that when the Imam would be slow poisoned while he was riding on his horse, the narrations say that the effect of the blood, the effect of the poison had been meshed into the leather of the saddle, and that began to go into the cloth and to the flesh of the Imam. And after some time, the poison began to do its effect, and the Imam became very ill. And when the Imam became very ill, he called his near ones close by. He called Imam al-Sadiq nearby, his son. He called the Ahlul Bayt nearby. The same Imam is the one who was a witness to Karbala, and the same Imam who said that during the Hajj season, make sure, and he set aside an amount of money to say that make sure you have a majlis to commemorate me in these nights in particular. Why? Why did the Imam emphasize this? Because perhaps he was reminding the people that he's a living memory of Karbala, and the memory of Karbala should not go, number one. Number two, at the same time, these are the awliya of Allah. These are the loved, beloved ones of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, who we must learn from. And if we reflect on their lives should be teaching us how to go closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Nonetheless, this Imam, the poison affected him, and his soul began to leave his blessed body. At that point in time, Imam al-Sadiq, he made all the arrangements for the ghusl and the kafan. But I believe, and I would say, that perhaps this Imam remembered in his final moments those images and those visions of Karbala, of Kufa, of Sham. He perhaps remembered Bibi Sakina as a young child running from tent to tent. He perhaps remembered the vision of his own father, Imam Sajjad, seeing his grandfather, Imam al-Hussein, laying on the plains of Karbala without ghusl and without kafan. Perhaps he would remember all of those things. 1,000 salams on you, Imam al-Baqir, but 1,000 salams on your grandfather, Aba Abdullah. Imam Hassan alayhi salam himself says, La yawmuka yawmuka ya Aba Abdullah. Oh Aba Abdullah al-Hussein, there is no day like your day. Azadaro, दो जुमले सुन लीजिए. ये इमाम बाकिर हैं जिन्होंने करबला अपनी आंखों से देखा. जो करबला से कूफा और शाम तलक इमाम चलते गए. इमाम ने अपने बाबा इमाम सज्जाद को भी देखा, मगर शायद वो मंजर भी याद आया होगा इमाम अल-बाकर को आखिरी वक्त में जो 40 थी, और जब वापस करबला आए शुहदा के पास, जो लुटवा काफिला आया, इमाम सज्जाद, बीबी ज़ैनब, हुसैन इब्न अली की कब्र पर कैसे गिरे, इमाम बाकर को सब याद आया होगा. على لعنة الله إلى القوم الظالمين وسيعلم الذين ظلموا أي منقلب ينقلبون إنا لله وإنا إليه راجعون. صلى الله عليك يا رسول الله, صلى الله عليك يا أمير المؤمنين, صلى الله عليك يا فاطمة الزهراء سيدة النساء العالمين, صلى الله عليك يا حسن المجتبى. السلام على الحسين وعلى علي بن الحسين وعلى أولاد الحسين وعلى أصحاب الحسين. خصوصا سيدي ومولاي بالفضل العباس ibn Amir al-Mu'min. Ya Allah, we ask you to allow us to accept this ibadah. Ya Allah, we ask you to allow us to learn from the knowledge and the wisdom of Imam al-Baqir alayhi salam. Ya Allah, we ask you to allow us to learn from the scholarship and the ulama and the marajid that guide us in this world, in this time, based on the teaching of the Ahlul Bayt. Ya Allah, allow us to be known as the Shia of the Ahlul Bayt for our knowledge, as the ulama of the Hawza and the Ahlul Bayt have indicated that the Shia should be known for their knowledge. And Ya Allah, hasten the reappearance of Imam Sahib al-Aswad Zaman and allow us to be amongst his companions when he returns. A final request to please recite Surah Al-Fatiha for your marhameen, for our marhameen, for the marhameen of the sponsors and all those who make the marhameen of all those who make these programs possible, and especially for the marhameen of those who do not have someone to recite a Fatiha for them in this night. Surah Al-Mubarak Al-Fatiha ma'as salawat. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad. Bismillah. Maatme Hussein, ya Hussein, 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 Hussein.
اماں فضا بتا دے مجھ کو پتھر کیوں آ رہے ہیں، اماں فضا بتا دے مجھ کو پتھر کیوں آ رہے ہیں، کیسا ہے یہ چراغا دل ڈوبے جا رہے ہیں، کیا شام آ گیا ہے، اماں فضا ارے بتا دے مجھ کو پتھر کیوں آ رہے ہیں، اماں فضا بتا دے مجھ کو پتھر کیوں آ رہے ہیں، ہونے لگی اذانیں کیسے سروں کو ڈھانپے، ارے بازو بندھے ہوئے ہیں خون رو رہی ہے آنکھیں، آنکھوں سے خون کے رستے خون میں نہا رہے ہیں، کیا شام آ گیا ہے، اماں فضا ارے بتا دے مجھ کو پتھر کیوں آ رہے ہیں، اماں فضا بتا دے مجھ کو پتھر کیوں آ رہے ہیں، سجاد کا کلیجہ صد پاش ہو رہا ہے، ایک ایک زخم ان کا اس غم میں رو رہا ہے، زینب کا نام لے کر آداب بلا رہے ہیں، کیا شام آ گیا ہے، اماں فضا بتا دے مجھ کو پتھر ہے، اماں فضا ہے بتا دے مجھ کو پتھر کیوں آ رہے ہیں، نیزوں پہ جتنے سر ہے ایک سر ہے ان میں ایسا، ارے آنکھیں ہے بند اس کی اور خاک پر ہے گرتا، عباس کا یہ سر ہے تیور بتا رہے ہیں، کیا شام آ گیا ہے، اماں فضا جزاک اللہ بتا دے مجھ کو پتھر کیوں آ رہے ہیں، اماں فضا ہے بتا دے مجھ کو پتھر کیوں آ رہے ہیں، اتنا چلے ہیں پیدل کانٹوں پہ سارے قیدی، ارے تھک جاتی چلتے چلتے چلتی اگر زمیں بھی، پیڑوں کے آبلے بھی آنسو بہا رہے ہیں، کیا شام آ گیا ہے، اماں فضا بتا دے مجھ کو پتھر کیوں آ رہے ہیں، ماں کی گودیوں سے لپٹے ہوئے ہیں بچے، अरे हाथ रस्सियों में माँ के से जकड़े, बच्चे जो गिर रहे हैं, बच्चे जो गिर रहे हैं, वो मरते जा रहे हैं, क्या शाम आ गया है। अम्मा फिजा बता दे मुझको, पत्थर क्यों आ रहे हैं। अम्मा फिजा अरे बता दे मुझको, पत्थर क्यों आ रहे हैं। लोग किस तरह के हमसे दुआ कराएं, ए कैदियों दुआ दो, ये दिन हम पे आए, लेकर दुआएं हमसे दिल भी दुखा रहे हैं, क्या शाम आ गया है। अम्मा फिजा है बता दे मुझको, पत्थर क्यों आ रहे हैं। अम्मा फिजा बता दे मुझको, पत्थर क्यों आ रहे हैं। सूरतुल फातिहा।
बिस्मिल्लाहिर्रहमानिर्रहीम। अस्सलामु अलैका या रसूल अल्लाह, अस्सलामु अलैका या अमीरल मुमिनीन, अस्सलामु अलैकी या फातिमत ज़हरा सय्यदत निसाइल आलमीन, अस्सलामु अलैका या अबा मुहम्मद अल-हसन बिन अली अल-मुज्तबा, अस्सलामु अलल हुसैन व अला अली इब्न अल-हुसैन व अला औलादिल हुसैन व अला अस्हाबिल हुसैन, खुसूसन सय्यदी व मौलाय अबिल फضल अल-अब्बास وأختيك زينب وأم كلثوم وبنتك سكينة وعلى ابن عمك مسلم بن عقيل. السلام عليك يا زين العابدين وقرة عين الناظرين. السلام عليك يا محمد بن علي الباقر. السلام عليك يا جعفر بن محمد الصادق. السلام عليك يا موسى بن جعفر الكاظم. السلام عليك يا علي بن موسى الرضا المرتضى. السلام عليك يا محمد بن علي التقي الجواد. السلام عليك يا علي بن محمد النقي الناصح الأمين. السلام عليك يا حسن بن علي الزكي العسكري. صلى الله عليك يا ابن الزهراء يا صاحب الزمان. صلى الله عليك يا ابن الحسن يا صاحب الزمان. سيدي الأمان 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 من فتنة الزمان. السلام عليك يا صاحب الزمان. أحسن الله لك العزاء في جدك محمد الباقر. السلام عليك يا شريك القرآن وكعبة الإيمان وإمامنا وإمام الإنس والجان. عجل الله لك ما وعدك من النصر وظهور الأمر ورحمة الله وبركاته. اللهم كن لوليك الحجة بن الحسن صلواتك عليه وعلى آبائه في هذه الساعة وفي كل الساعة وليا وحافظا وقائدا وناصرا ودليلا وعينا حتى تسكنه أرضك طوعا وتمتعه فيها طويلا. وصل يا رب على محمد وآله الطاهرين.